8:38 here on AM 760 Progressive Talk. Is the hiring of an undocumented immigrant an act of patriotism? That is the argument being made in the most recent edition of Business Week magazine. Joining us now is Charles Kenny, who wrote this article. The headline: How to Be a Patriot, Hire an Illegal Immigrant. I don't like that term. I don't like calling anybody illegal. I don't think it makes a lot of. I think it's kind of a denigrating way to put it, but I don't want to blame Charles because I'm sure the headline writers are different than his. I think they're more properly called undocumented immigrants. And the subhead is: Laws against undocumented immigration make little economic or moral sense, so why punish the brave citizens who break them? Charles Kenny joins us now by phone. Charles, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks very much for having me.
Okay. An act of patriotism. I've heard the argument that hiring undocumented immigrants, or at least not checking somebody's immigration status, is something, I've heard the argument before that it's something that we should accept, it's something that we should tolerate. You're arguing that it's actually even beyond that, it's an act of patriotism. How do you see it that way?
Well, this is a wonderful country built on immigration. At the time of independence in 1776, there were like 8-9 million people here. Pretty much, most of them were immigrants, and most of the people who've arrived since, are immigrants too. And that's how we got up to 300 million. It's what's made this country great. At the moment, the ability for more people to come into this country is severely constrained by the current laws, and I think that's having a bad effect on the American economy. All the evidence suggests that undocumented workers coming into the country have a positive effect on overall employment rates, on overall incomes for everybody, the immigrants themselves, but also for the local populations. And so hiring an undocumented worker makes the U.S. economy stronger.
We have a link on our website, by the way, Sirota.am760.net, to this Business Week story. You can find it there. What I worry about in at least the framing of your article is that one of the problems seems to me to be that in not having higher levels of legal immigration, we have created a second-class form of, and citizenship is not the right word, a second class of people in our country who don't have legal rights in the workplace, who don't have rights to wage enforcement, don't have rights to all the things that we take for granted as documented citizens in the workplace, and that the hiring of undocumented immigrants is simply a way for a company to try to exploit an exploitable pool of labor. I'm somebody who says basically that I think we need to seriously increase legal immigration, create a path to citizenship for people who are here in an undocumented fashion, but that there is a problem with allowing or permitting an economy to have a second-class, economically speaking, very exploitable pool of labor, and specifically undocumented immigrants. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I absolutely agree with you that the best outcome would be a lot more legal immigration. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure politically at the moment that's feasible. So, the second best option, if you will, is a lot more undocumented workers. And that's definitely better than the third best option, which is no legal or undocumented workers coming in. I would say, though, that the people coming in illegally or with undocumented status are making the choice to do that. Walking across the border from Mexico to the United States as a Mexican without a high school diploma, you can increase your income by 2.5 times. It has a huge effect on the incomes of those undocumented workers. It also has a huge effect on the families that come with them and the families that stay behind, because undocumented workers send money home to the families at home, and we see impacts on health and education and a range of impacts back in the countries that the undocumented workers come from. So, while I take your point that it would be better if these workers were fell under the same rules as the rest of us, still, it's much better for them to be able to come in illegally, undocumented, than it is to keep them out altogether.
Well, I certainly agree with that. I certainly think the idea of rounding up undocumented folks who are here in a kind of Gestapo fashion is unacceptable. I completely oppose that. I think all of these laws that have passed in states that have tried to further demonize undocumented immigrants, I think they are completely misguided. I think they distract attention from the conversation, the more politically difficult conversation that we need to have about raising legal immigration rates and creating a path to citizenship. Now, I want to get into some of the data here because I think a lot of people would say it's counterintuitive to argue that undocumented immigration actually helps the economy. Now, there's been a debate about whether undocumented immigrants use more tax revenues than they contribute to the United States. Data out of Texas suggests that actually, in many cases, the undocumented population is contributing more money in a net effect in terms of how much they're paying in taxes versus services that they use than they take out of the system. But you're actually arguing that undocumented immigration is beyond the tax revenue question, is actually a good for the economy, which runs counter to the idea that undocumented immigrants are taking jobs in a recession that Americans would take and want to take and would be able to take. Tell us a little bit about some of the data you cite.
Okay, well, I mean, two things. First of all, when it comes to the recession, one of the interesting things that's happened during this recession is the rates of illegal immigration have dropped through the floor. Mm-hmm. When there aren't jobs, the undocumented workers don't come. So blaming undocumented workers for the hideously high unemployment rate in the United States at the moment is blaming, as you suggest, completely the wrong people. We should be. There are lots of other people to blame, but it's not the fault of undocumented workers. Now, how can it be that having an undocumented worker coming into the country actually helps the U.S.? Well, they come in and they're very good at providing services, and we know that because of what's going on in Georgia at the moment, where they passed this law, trying to stop, especially farmers hiring undocumented workers. And what we're seeing is fruit rotting on the trees, and attempts to get, for example, prison workers to pick the fruit. Turns out the prison workers aren't very good at it, really don't enjoy it, and it's not working out. This is hard work, and it's actually in some ways quite skilled work. And undocumented workers are good at it, and prison populations turn out not to be. So they're good at providing these services that we need, and they do it for not very much money, to be honest.
Well, and that's the point I want to get to very quickly. And again, online with us is Charles Kenny of Business Week. We have a link on our website, sirota.am760.net, to his new piece that argues that hiring undocumented immigrants is actually an act of patriotism. Aren't we saying that when undocumented immigrants are good at particular jobs and that Americans wouldn't take those jobs anyway, aren't we really saying that undocumented immigrants are willing to take those jobs at the wages that they're being offered at, and that Americans wouldn't take those jobs at those wages? And isn't the argument then the economics behind that essentially using undocumented immigrants to rig labor market economics? That typically when you had a lower, or by Economics 101, when you had a lower supply of legal labor, wages would rise to try to attract people to the jobs that society needs to be done. Aren't we really using undocumented immigrants? Are we really having a discussion about them taking jobs that Americans wouldn't want? Aren't we leaving out the half sentence that says wouldn't want those jobs at the wages they're currently being paid?
Okay, I think there's, for a start, there's a sort of direct evidence about what happens when you see more undocumented workers come in, what happens to the unskilled wages of local people. And the answer is that there may be a small negative effect. The studies from the National Bureau of Economic Research suggest that maybe $8 per week reduction in the unskilled native-born workers' pay when there's a lot more unskilled undocumented immigration coming in. So there is an effect. It's a small effect. It's about 2% of the local wages. But there's this idea that if only we got rid of the illegal immigrants and massively increased the wages that you pay to agricultural workers, then there wouldn't be a problem, and we'd suddenly have lots more local unskilled people being employed. Well, not in a global economy. What would happen is the farmers just wouldn't be producing that fruit anymore because they'd be producing it in Mexico, where the labor's a lot cheaper. So this idea that there's a sort of a fixed stock of jobs that if you double the price, double the wages paid to those jobs, the number of jobs won't change. It's just wrong. The number of jobs would go down.
And they would go somewhere else. I think that's a really, really important point. Charles Kenny, he is a contributor to Business Week. We have a link on our website, sirota.am760.net, to his piece about this. Check it out. Charles, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks very much for having me.
Really appreciate it. 8:48 here on AM 760 Progressive Talk.